"You're too hard to manage." The vice president's son said it on a 5 a.m. call and fired me before sunrise. By 9, I accepted an offer from their $500 million rival. By noon, their investors started pulling out. Then the chief executive officer's voice cracked on the call. Who gave him the client list? The phone vibrated against the nightstand with the specific, aggressive rhythm of a disaster waiting to happen. 6:02 a.m. The sun hadn't even thought about rising over the Chicago skyline yet, but apparently corporate stupidity was an early riser. I squinted at the screen. The caller ID flashed Preston VP Strategy. The title was a joke. The kid was 26, wore loafers without socks, and thought strategy meant regurgitating buzzwords he heard on a finance podcast while hungover. I cleared my throat and slid my finger across the glass. "George here." "Yes." "Hey, George, look, this isn't working out." No preamble, no good morning, just the static-filled voice of a nepotism hire calling from what sounded like the inside of a sensory deprivation tank, or maybe just his large, tiled bathroom. "I'm sorry." I sat up, pulling the duvet tighter around me. The air in the condo was freezing. The heating unit had been making a death rattle for weeks, much like Optima Holdings' quarterly earnings report. You're too difficult to manage, George," Preston repeated. I could hear him chewing something. A bagel, nicotine gum, the sheer audacity. "My dad and I talked it over last night. We need agility. Your legacy infrastructure. We're pivoting to a leaner client approach. So, effective immediately, we're letting you go. Human resources will email the Cobra stuff." I didn't blink. I didn't cry. My heart rate didn't even spike. It is the thing about working in high-stakes client relations for a decade, you develop a reptilian indifference to chaos. I felt only a profound, cold sense of recognition. Difficult to manage. That wasn't a critique of my character. It was a confession of his incompetence. I was the one who remembered the Sterling Group investors' children's birthdays. I was the one who had talked Vanguard's VP of operations off the ledge when our tech stack imploded last November. I wasn't legacy infrastructure. I was the load-bearing wall holding up the entire corner of their shaky business structure. "Noted," I said. My voice was flat, void of the panic he was likely hoping for. He wanted me to beg so he could feel like a titan of industry instead of a boy playing with his father's checkbook. "Okay, well, good luck," he stammered, clearly thrown by my lack of hysterics or emotional reaction. The line went dead with a muffled click. I stared at the phone screen. My career at Optima Holdings, 10 years of blood, sweat, and missed anniversaries, ended by a kid who probably thought EBITDA was a Greek island. A sharp, stinging pain flared not from sadness, but from the brutal injustice of it. It brought up the old, familiar feeling of betrayal. I had given my loyalty to a structure that only recognized bloodlines and buzzwords. The chill of the Chicago morning was nothing compared to the ice that formed in my chest after Preston's call. I didn't go back to sleep. I didn't reach for a tissue. I swung my legs out of bed and walked straight toward my home office, the carpet cold beneath my feet. The glow of the monitors was the only light in the room, cutting through the gray pre-dawn gloom. I sat down and picked up the company laptop. I typed my password and waited. My access hadn't been cut yet. Amateurs. Preston had fired me at 6:03 a.m. He himself didn't get into the office until 8 a.m. The automated revocation script, which cut off digital access, usually ran at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That gave me a nearly 3-hour window where I was technically fired but digitally alive. I was a ghost in the machine, and I had work to do. I logged into the client relationship management system. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. The satisfying clack, 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 sounding like gunfire in the quiet apartment. My first mission was simple: gather all the pieces of my value before they could be locked away. I went straight to the client notes section. This is where the real value of the company lived, not the contracts. Contracts were just paper. Notes were the gold. The notes contained the soft intel. Which investor was going through a contentious divorce and needed extra reassurance, which CEO preferred encrypted texts over emails, and which CFO was secretly shopping for a new platform. This was the context. I didn't delete anything, which is illegal. That's amateur hour. Deleting files leaves a digital footprint that screams, disgruntled employee. I wasn't disgruntled, I was strategic. I wasn't trying to destroy data. I was taking my value back. I opened files one by one, looking at them, letting my 20 years of training do its job. I didn't need a flash drive or a cloud download. I had a photographic memory. I didn't need to steal the client list. I needed to memorize the passwords to the relationships. My attention snagged on one small, petty opportunity for immediate retribution. I went into the calendar system for the upcoming quarterly review, the one Preston was supposed to lead next week to prove his worth to the board. I didn't delete the meeting. I just uninvited the key stakeholders. Then, I turned off the notification that would alert the organizer, Preston, of the change. To the system, it would look like a momentary glitch. To the investors, it would look like the meeting had vanished. To Preston, on the day of the presentation, it would look like an empty room. I logged out at 6:45 a.m., right as the sun began to bleed gray light through the window blinds. I walked to the kitchen and started the coffee grinder. The noise was aggressive, violent, and beautiful. Difficult to manage, I whispered to the empty kitchen, pouring the freshly ground beans into the machine. Preston had made a critical calculation error. He thought my value was in a database he could reassign. He didn't realize that I was the list. The relationships were tethered to me, George, not the logo on my business card. He hadn't just fired an employee. He had severed the nervous system of the company. The external conflict of being fired had already set off the internal shift. I was done being loyal to a fault. I had exactly 3 hours fired, but still digitally alive, a ghost in the machine, and I was not wasting a second. The violent hum of the coffee grinder had momentarily cleansed the air of Preston's voice, but the cold resolve remained. I was done being the silent victim of corporate incompetence. The walk from the kitchen back to my home office felt like walking across a threshold, crossing the line from employee to enemy combatant. My laptop remained open, the screen illuminating the client relationship management system, the CRM, where the most vital organs of Optima Holdings resided. My time was 6:45 a.m. Preston wouldn't arrive for over an hour, and the automated lockout script would take even longer. This was my window of opportunity, a moment of strategic vulnerability that only an amateur would allow. I was not deleting. Deleting was a crime, and crimes left trails. I was engaging in an act of sophisticated data transference, from the corporation's server to the organic hard drive of my mind. I focused on the client notes section, the place I had always understood to be the true gold mine. Contracts were static documents. The notes were fluid, living records of human weakness, preference, and trust. There was the Vanguard file. Alina, their VP of Operations, preferred communication via text message before 8 a.m., but only using specific industry acronyms. Her assistant was the gatekeeper, but a text about Q4 deployment synergy would bypass him instantly. That wasn't in any formal training manual. That was the knowledge only accumulated through years of late-night crisis management and earning Alina's trust. Then came the file on the Sterling Group. Arthur Sterling, the whale, the old money. Preston knew Sterling hated the new digital dashboard interface. I knew Sterling demanded his monthly report be printed on ivory stock paper with a 2-point font because he was legally blind in one eye. The most crucial notes Sterling's passion for vintage scotch. Specifically, he responded best to a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan when the market dipped by more than 1.5% in a single week. This wasn't corporate intelligence. This was knowing the client better than his own family. I needed to extract this context, not the data. My photographic memory, honed over 2 decades of processing dense financial reports, went into overdrive. It was a dizzying sequence of reading, internalizing, and filing away specifics: the CEO who was shopping for a competing platform, the investor who was quietly going through a messy divorce and needed his portfolio shielded from prying eyes, the fact that Mr. Henderson could never be called on a Tuesday, which was his dialysis day. These were the human passwords to the relationships. The company had the blueprints, but I had the keys to the boiler room, the control panel, and the emergency exits. I briefly contemplated doing more damage, perhaps sending a confusing, automated email to everyone, but I resisted. That was emotion-driven. What I was doing was purely professional. I needed to leave them a perfectly working car with flat tires, an empty gas tank, and a steering wheel that only I knew how to navigate. I quickly double-checked the calendar deletion. the stakeholders removed from Preston's upcoming quarterly review. The system was clean, reporting no errors. Preston would see the meeting on his own calendar, but would receive no confirmation that his key audience had been secretly uninvited. It was such a small, non-illegal tweak. Yet its impact would be catastrophic when he realized he was speaking to an empty room, unable to call the attendees because he didn't have their direct numbers, only the generic office lines listed in the CRM. The sense of isolation was palpable, but it was also empowering. I was acting entirely for myself for the first time in years. All that misplaced loyalty, the feeling that I had failed my family's business years ago and needed to overcompensate by being indispensable to Optima, was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I had allowed myself to be defined by a title and a logo. Now, I was reclaiming the true source of my value, my mind, and my relationships. 7:20 a.m. The window was closing. The time to harvest was over. It was time to formulate the ultimate exit strategy. I logged out of the CRM, wiping the browser history and cache. The laptop was now inert, a clean slate. They could audit the logs all they wanted. They would find no deleted files, no downloads, and no digital crime. They would find only a highly focused employee doing her job efficiently until the moment she was cut off. I picked up my personal phone. I had about 2 hours before the rest of the world woke up. 2 hours to formulate the kind of exit strategy that they teach in business schools as a warning. I wasn't going to call a recruiter. Recruiters were for people who needed jobs. I didn't need a job. I needed a weapon. I scrolled past my mother's contact, past my ex-husband's number, which I really should delete, and stopped on a name I hadn't dialed in 3 years, Marcus Thorne, Regional Director at Apex Capital, our direct $700 million competitor. Marcus had tried to poach me 5 times. The last time, I told him I was loyal to the vision at Optima. Loyalty, I thought, that word now tasted like ash. Loyalty is just corporate speak for sucker. I watched the seconds tick by on the microwave clock, 6:50, 8 a.m. I wasn't just going to leave Optima Holdings. I was going to take the floorboards, the load-bearing wall, and half the roof with me. The feeling of vindication was already starting to replace the coldness. I was about to use their incompetence as the foundation for my next, much greater success. The internal decision was made. I was not seeking employment, I was initiating corporate warfare. With the first act complete, it was time to move from defense to offense, and for that, I needed a weapon. By 7:30 a.m., I was standing on the corner of 4th and State, watching my golden retriever, Buster, sniff a fire hydrant with the kind of intense, dedicated focus Preston had never applied to a spreadsheet in his life. The city was waking up. Delivery trucks idled, sailing plumes of gray exhaust into the freezing air. Commuters rushed toward the elevated train line, heads down, eyes glazed, marching toward their cubicles. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't one of them. I was untethered, an alien observing the ritual. I held Buster's leash in one hand and my personal phone in the other, my thumb hovering over Marcus Thorne's number. Marcus was the regional director at Apex Capital, our direct $700 million rival. There was a specific etiquette to calling a competitor. You didn't do it during office hours, that was desperate. You didn't do it after hours, that was intrusive. You did it in the power window, that small slice of time between the morning workout or commute and the first mandatory meeting of the day. 7:40 a.m. perfect. I hit dial. It rang once. George. Marcus's voice was crisp. No confusion. No, hello. He knew exactly who was calling, which was the difference between a professional and a pretender. Morning, Marcus, I said, watching Buster finally decide that the hydrant was indeed just a hydrant. I hope I'm not interrupting your meditation. Was just finishing an espresso, he replied. To what do I owe the pleasure? Finally decided to let me buy you that lunch. I'm actually free for breakfast, I said, my tone deliberately light. Or, more accurately, I'm free for the foreseeable future. As of about 90 minutes ago, there was a silence on the line, not an awkward silence, but a heavy, deliberate one. It was the sound of a shark sensing blood in the water. I had confirmed his suspicions, and now he was calculating the risk. They fired you. Marcus stated, his tone dropping an octave. Preston did. I confirmed, careful to keep my language clear and factual. Said I was too difficult to manage. Wanted to pivot to agility. Marcus let out a short, bark-like laugh. Agility. That's cute. That's what people say right before they drive the car off a cliff, because they fired the only person who knows how to use the brakes. The immediate validation was a profound emotional shift. That sharp, stinging pain of betrayal was immediately soothed by Marcus's instant recognition of my worth. "I'm not calling to vent, Marcus. I know," he said. "You're calling because you know that I know Optima's entire first quarter strategy relies on 3 key accounts. Accounts that, if I recall correctly, only take calls from you." God, it was refreshing to talk to an adult, an absolute professional. "I'm not confirming or denying anything," I said, keeping it legally vague. "I'm just saying that I am currently a free agent. But my non-compete—" I paused for effect, letting the significance of the delay sink in. "Well, let's just say Optima's Human Resources Department has been a revolving door for 5 years. The paperwork for my last promotion in 2019, which would have updated my terms, is probably currently a coaster on someone's desk in the Cayman Islands. So, you're clear. I'm wide open." "Name your number," Marcus said. No hesitation. "No, let me check with the board." He had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. 20% bump on my base salary. I dictated, my heart rate finally rising not from fear, but from exhilaration. "Senior Vice President title, and I want full autonomy on the Sterling account if or when they decide to migrate." "Don't," Marcus said instantly. "I'll have the offer letter in your inbox in 10 minutes. Can you start Monday?" "I can start now." "Even better. I've got a 10 a.m. strategy call to discuss how to pry away the manufacturing sector from Optima. I'll send you the Zoom link. Don't say anything. Just show up. I want to see the look on my team's face. See you then." I hung up the phone. 7:42 a.m. I had been unemployed for exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes. In that time, I had secured a raise, a promotion, and a front row seat to my old company's funeral. The internal decision to prioritize my self-worth over the idea of misplaced loyalty had paid off instantly. I looked down at Buster, who was now gazing up at me expectantly. "Good boy," I said. "Let's go home. Mommy has to put on a blazer." The offer letter signed, my armor polished. It was time to light the match and let the corporate world smell the smoke. Back in the apartment, the initial adrenaline had settled into a cold, hard resolve. I took a quick shower, scrubbing off the feeling of Preston's voice and the 10 years of accumulated corporate fatigue. I put on my actual armor, a sharp charcoal suit, a silk blouse, and the pearl earrings I had bought myself after closing the massive Anderson deal 5 years ago. I checked my personal email. The Apex Capital offer letter was there, time-stamped 7:50, 5 a.m. Marcus didn't mess around. I signed it digitally. My hand didn't shake. I was officially a senior vice president, having traded the sinking ship for the helm of a massive lifeboat in less than 2 hours. The feeling was a cold, quiet satisfaction. At 8:55 a.m., I received a text from Optima's automated system. "Remote wipe initiated. Device will reset in 60 seconds. I watched my company phone go black. The Apple logo appeared, wiping away a decade of emails, texts, and contacts. They thought they were hurting me. They thought erasing the phone erased the threat. I picked up my personal phone, the one I had just used to sign a contract with their biggest rival. I opened LinkedIn. This was the moment to shift the conflict from a private matter to a public one. Corporate warfare is subtle, it's passive-aggressive. It's weaponizing good manners into a status update. I didn't write a scathing tell-all. That was tacky, divorced dad on Facebook energy. Instead, I typed, "After 10 incredible years, I'm closing the chapter at Optima. It's been a journey. While I'll miss the incredible teams I've built, sometimes you outgrow a space that can no longer support your vision." I paused, letting the implication land. The space was too small for my vision, or perhaps too incompetent. I finished, excited to announce that I've accepted a senior VP role at Apex Capital, starting immediately. To my clients, you know where to find me. Everyone else, let's build something real. I hit post. The vacuum effect had begun. I poured a second cup of coffee and waited for the inevitable ping of panic. It didn't take long. By 10 a.m., my LinkedIn post had more engagement than Optima's last 3 product launches combined. The corporate world is a small, incestuous village. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone loves a train wreck, especially when the conductor is a 20, something with a trust fund. The comments were a mix of generic congratulations and carefully worded inquiries from people who smelled smoke. Huge loss for Optima, commented the CFO of a logistics firm we managed. That was a public shot across the bow. Can't wait to see what you do at Apex, wrote a vendor whom I knew hated Preston personally. But the real action was in the direct messages. My inbox was flooding. 2 institutional investors, heavy hitters with portfolios worth north of $50 million, emailed me privately. Where are you headed? We need to talk. Does this mean the third quarter restructure is off? Call me? I didn't reply immediately. In negotiation, silence is leverage. If you answer too fast, you look eager. If you wait, you look busy. I wanted to look like I was already solving someone else's problems. Then came the text from inside the burning building. It was Chloe, a junior analyst I had mentored. She was bright, hardworking, and unfortunately, currently sitting 20 feet away from Preston's office. Chloe's first text arrived at 10:14 a.m. Oh my God, George, tell me it's not true. A minute later, Preston just walked out of his office looking like he swallowed a bee. He's asking the CTO for your laptop password. He says you compromised the integrity of the database. Did you give someone the list? Everyone is freaking out. I sipped my coffee watching the bubbles pop on the surface. Poor Chloe. She was witnessing the meltdown in real time. My reply was brief, me. I didn't give anyone anything, Chloe. I just left. The list is in the system. Tell him to check the cloud backups if he can figure out the password. Hint it's not password 123 anymore. Chloe's next text was pure panic, as screaming at the CTO. Says clients are emailing him asking why their scheduled calls are disappearing from the calendar. George, what did you do? My final text to her was the truth, me. Nothing. I just stopped holding the ceiling up. I felt a twinge of guilt. Just a twinge. Chloe didn't deserve this. The support staff, the IT guys, the receptionists, they were the collateral damage in Preston's ego trip. But you can't save everyone when the ship is sinking. Sometimes the best you can do is show them where the lifeboats are. Update your resume, Chloe. Send it to me tonight. I put the phone down. On my laptop screen, the Zoom meeting for Apex Capital was starting. I clicked join. The screen populated with faces. Marcus was there, looking smug. His team looked confused. They were in the middle of discussing how to breach Optima's hold on the manufacturing sector. I was embracing my empowered self-worth. It was time to show them what they bought. The LinkedIn post had hit its mark. Now the wounded beast, the CEO, Richard Vance, was calling to negotiate. The phone rang, displaying a number I immediately recognized as the private line of Richard Vance, Optima's CEO and, crucially, Preston's father. He was the man who had signed off on my firing simply because his son told him I was difficult. I let it go to voicemail. Rule number 1, you do not take the first call. You let them leave a message. You let them hear the sound of their own desperation recorded for posterity. The voicemail notification popped up a minute later. Richard sounded tired, defeated, and suddenly old. George, it's Richard. Give me a call back. There seems to be some confusion regarding the client transition. We need to clear this up immediately. Confusion. That was a polite word for hemorrhage. I deleted the voicemail. I wasn't difficult to manage, Richard. I was just impossible to replace. My next immediate crisis was the legal threat. The phone rang again. It was a 312 area code. Optima Legal. Miss Evans. A voice like sandpaper grated. It was Gerald, the general counsel, a man who had been asleep at the wheel since 2015. Hi, Gerald. Long time. Did you finally find that Tupperware I left in the fridge? I asked, keeping my voice light. This isn't a social call, George. We have reason to believe you are in violation of your employment agreement. We're seeing activity indicating you're soliciting clients. I'm not soliciting anyone, Gerald. I countered calmly. They're calling me. There's a difference. It's called freedom of choice. It's very popular in America. You have a non-compete. He barked, his voice straining. Section 4, paragraph 2. You are barred from working with any competitor for 18 months. Gerald, I said, my voice dropping to a soothing, patronizing tone. Do you have the signed copy of that agreement, the one that was supposedly updated in 2019? Of course, we do. It's in your file. Is it? I challenged a gamble, but an educated one. Or is it in the box of files that got lost when we moved floors in 2019? Because I seem to recall human resources sending out a panic email asking everyone to re-sign their docs. And I seem to recall forgetting. Silence. The kind of silence that costs billable hours. This interaction stirred up the old, raw fear of corporate power, but the knowledge of their internal disarray gave me immense confidence. My past struggles with loyalty were giving way to the cold, necessary focus on self-preservation. "I'm looking at the digital record," he blustered. "Digital record says pending signature, doesn't it?" I guessed. "We will bury you in litigation," Gerald threatened, losing his composure. "You can try," I said, "but while you're drafting the lawsuit, Vanguard is drafting a termination letter. You might want to focus on that." I hung up. I received the cease and desist email at 1 p.m. Attached was a PDF named Origin Evans C&D PDF. It was written in all caps, bold fonts, using words like immediately and of irreparable harm. It was designed to make me panic. I didn't freeze. I forwarded it to Marcus. Subject, fan mail. 3 minutes later, Marcus walked into the Zoom room I was still idling in. He had a woman with him who looked like she ate nails for breakfast and chased them with scotch. "George," Marcus said, grinning. "Meet Sarah, our general counsel. Just read your love letter from Optima." Sarah adjusted her glasses. "It's cute," she said, her voice dry and raspy. "They're citing a 2014 contract template that was invalidated by the Illinois Freedom to Work Act amendments in 2022. Also, they misspelled proprietary twice." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "So, I'm good." "You're better than good," Sarah said. "You're a ghost." I called a friend over there, off the record, of course. Apparently, Gerald is tearing the HR archives apart looking for a wet signature from you post 2018. They can't find it because it doesn't exist. When we merged with the Theta Group, HR was a disaster zone, I explained. The director was fired for embezzlement, and half the files were misplaced during the audit. They sent out a digital signature link to everyone to update their files. I just never clicked it. "Why?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Because I was busy saving the Vanguard account while Preston was trying to figure out how to expense a strip club visit as client development," I said. "Priorities." Sarah laughed. "Well, their incompetence is our immunity. Let them sue. By the time they get a court date, you'll have moved half their portfolio. I'll draft a response that basically tells them to go kick rocks, professionally speaking." The legal bluff was dead. The real blow came through my new Apex email. Optima's biggest client in the manufacturing sector was Vanguard. I had managed the Vanguard relationship for 6 years. The vice president of operations, Alina, was my loyal contact. The email was from Alina, lunch buddy. "Just heard the news. Their loss. We're removing Optima from the pending deal chain effective immediately. Operational instability. That's the official reason. Unofficially, new kid called me sweetheart on a voicemail. Let's talk transfer protocols." I forwarded the email to Marcus with a single note incoming. This must have triggered a seismic event back at Optima. Revenue projections dropped instantly. I imagined Preston standing in front of the dashboard, watching the numbers tick down like a bomb timer. I was no longer afraid of their power. I was fueled by their ineptitude. The fear of being crushed by Optima had given way to the deep, satisfying confidence that they had already defeated themselves. The final domino was the largest, and I was about to serve him a rare steak and a dose of reality. The immediate crisis of the Vanguard exit had passed, and the legal threats had been dismissed. Now it was time to move on Arthur Sterling, the whale, the $80 million anchor of Optima Holdings. I drafted a short, concise email. I did not use my new Apex address. I used my personal Gmail, ensuring it would bypass any corporate filtration system and land directly on his personal device. The subject line was simply his name, Mr. Sterling. The body read, "I wanted to personally inform you that as of this morning, I am no longer with Optima. It was not my choice to leave, but it is my choice where I go next. I am now at Apex Capital. I know you value continuity. I know you hate the dashboard interface Preston is trying to push. I know you just want your quarterly dividends to arrive on time without a strategy pivot conversation. I'm having lunch at the grill tomorrow, 12:30 p.m., name table. If you're hungry, I'd love to buy you a steak. If not, it was an honor serving you. George. I hit send. This was the risk. If Sterling stayed with Optima, Richard could stabilize the ship and weather the storm. If Sterling left, the entire market would view Optima as fatally compromised. His exit would signal to everyone that the company was unsafe. I waited 1 minute, 2 minutes. My inbox pinned. From Arthur Sterling to George Evans at my personal address. The body contained just 5 words. I like my steak rare. See you at 12:30. I let out a shaky laugh. The external conflict of securing the whale was resolved. The core of my self-worth, the trust I had earned, was validated. I forwarded Sterling's reply to Marcus with a single note. You just earned your bonus. The grill is a Chicago institution, a place where deals are made, or in my case, where revenge is served rare. I arrived at 12:15 p.m. I wanted to be seated before Sterling arrived. I secured table 4 in the corner, away from the prying eyes of the financial lunch crowd. At 12:30 on the dot, Arthur Sterling walked in. He was 72, walking with a cane that looked like it could conceal a sword, and wore a suit that cost more than my first decade of rent combined. He spotted me, and for the first time in the 10 years I had known him, he smiled a genuine, crinkle-eyed smile. George, he said, easing himself into the booth. You look lighter. Unemployment suits me, Arthur. I said, signaling the waiter. Sparkling water for me. Scotch neat for the gentleman. The 18-year. He nodded in approval. You remember? I remember everything. That was my job. We ordered. We made small talk about his grandkids and the Bulls' terrible season. We didn't talk about Optima until the steaks arrived. Arthur cut into his filet with surgical precision. So, he said, not looking up, Preston, I agreed. The boy is an idiot, Arthur said calmly. I told Richard that when he hired him. I said, Richard, nepotism is fine if the kid is smart. If the kid is a dolt, it's suicide. Richard didn't listen. He wanted to modernize. I said, taking a sip of water. Agility. He wanted to play dress up. Arthur scoffed. He called me last week, you know. Tried to tell me my portfolio was over, indexed on traditional assets, and I should look into crypto. Me. Arthur Sterling. Crypto, he shook his head. I didn't fire him then because I knew you were the firewall. I knew you'd filter out the stupidity before it touched my money. I tried, I said, but the firewall got unplugged this morning. Arthur looked at me. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, dangerous. I never trusted the logo. I trusted you. You were the one who called me when the market tanked in '08 to tell me not to sell. You were the one who fixed the tax error in '15. You, not the firm. I'm at Apex now, Arthur. They respect the work. They don't think I'm difficult to manage. Difficult. Arthur chuckled. That's what weak men call strong men. My first wife was difficult. She also built half my empire. He took a sip of scotch. I'm moving the fund, George, he said quietly. All of it. The air left my lungs, all $80 million. The papers are all ready with my lawyers. You'll have them by end of day. Richard will have a stroke, I murmured. Richard needs a wake-up call or a retirement plan, Arthur said. He leaned in, his voice dropping. But here's the terrifying thing, George. I'm not the only one. We talk at the country clubs. The Davis family, the Hendersons, the pension fund guys, they've all been waiting. We were just waiting for you to make the first move. They're leaving, too. If I go, they go. I'm the bellwether. I looked at my phone under the table. 3 missed calls from Preston. One text at 12:45 p.m. say, can we talk, please? The please was new. Trouble, Arthur asked, eyeing the phone. Just the past trying to catch up, I said. I think I'll let it go to voicemail. Good boy, Arthur said. Now, tell me about this Apex group. Do they have good scotch? The best. I lied. I would make sure Marcus bought a crate by tomorrow. I walked out of that lunch feeling 10 feet tall. I had walked in as a fired employee scrambling for ground. I walked out as the architect of a corporate revolution. The internal journey from avoidance to embracing empowered self-worth was complete. I had not just saved myself, I had triggered a bank run. The Sterling notice had landed. All that remained was the final, public autopsy of Optima Holdings. It was 3 p.m., and the atmosphere inside Optima must have felt like a submarine that had gone too deep. The pressure was crushing the hull. I was back at my home desk, officially logged into Apex's secure server, watching the transfer request from the Sterling Group come through. It was a beautiful, digital document, $80 million migrating from the sinking ship to my lifeboat. My personal phone was now permanently on Do Not Disturb, but the notifications rolled in like waves. Chloe sent me a text that felt like a war correspondent dispatch. Chloe, 3:15 p.m. It's a bloodbath. Richard is in the boardroom screaming at Preston. Preston is crying, actually crying. The CTO did a full audit of your activity logs. My reply, and he told them I didn't touch a thing. Chloe, he said you didn't delete the data. You just took the passwords to the relationships. Richard threw a stapler. She took the passwords to the relationships. That was the most poetic thing the CTO had ever said. They were looking for a crime. A deleted folder, a stolen hard drive, a virus, anything that would make me the villain and them the victims. But there was no crime. It was just competence leaving the building, and the company was realizing that competence was the only thing standing between them and collapse. The rumor mill was spinning out of control. Staffers were updating their LinkedIn profiles in real time. I saw 3 connection requests from Optima vice presidents in the last hour, rats swimming toward the floating door. Then came the call from Marcus. George, he said, sounding like he was suppressing a laugh. You're not going to believe who just called me. Richard. No. Preston. I sat up. You're kidding. I called the main line, asked to speak to the director. He sounded completely unhinged. He tried to threaten me with a lawsuit for tortious interference. I put him on speaker so Sarah could hear. She laughed so loud he hung up. He's desperate, I said. He knows Sterling is gone. He probably got the legal notice 10 minutes ago. Oh, he knows. And get this, Richard is trying to freeze the transfer. He's claiming administrative review. It won't hold, but it buys them 24 hours. It doesn't matter, I replied. The damage is done. The trust is gone. Even if they hold the money hostage for a day, the client is mentally checked out. Exactly. Listen, George, the quarterly investor call for Optima is tomorrow morning. It's public because they have bondholders. You should listen in. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The internal tension of the day, the fear that I hadn't pushed hard enough, that they might still save themselves, was replaced by a chilling realization they were far too incompetent to survive. They were beyond saving. I received one last email to my personal account. It was from Preston. Subject, no subject. Body, you ruined everything. I hope you're happy. You're a vindictive jerk. I stared at the screen. He still didn't get it. He thought this was personal. He thought I did this to hurt him. I hit reply me. I didn't ruin anything, Preston. I just stopped fixing what you broke. Good luck on the call tomorrow. But I wasn't finished with the internal power structure yet. I knew that Richard was protecting his son, but the board of directors protected their money. I still had their personal email addresses memorized. I drafted one last email. I didn't use my Apex address. I used my personal Gmail, ensuring it carried no corporate threat, only personal warning. Subject, transition. Body, dear board members, as you may have heard, my tenure at Optima has ended abruptly. I want to ensure a smooth transition for the accounts I managed, protecting the value of your shares. However, I am currently being blocked by legal threats from the executive team. If you are wondering why key accounts are unresponsive or exiting, please direct your inquiries to Preston. I am happy to assist, provided the legal harassment ceases. Best, George. I hit send. It was a polite, well-worded grenade. The board didn't know the day-to-day operations. They just knew the stock price, and they knew me. I had presented to them for 5 years straight. I was betting that at least one of them would read it and pick up the phone, not to call me, but to call Richard, the CEO, and ask him why his son was setting fire to the furniture. Money is cowardly. It runs away from noise, and right now, Optima Holdings was the loudest place on Wall Street. By 2:30 p.m., 3 major investors had frozen their activity. This wasn't just we're unhappy. This was, we are pausing all capital deployment until we figure out if you people are actually insane. The freeze represented about $40 million in fluid capital. Richard was losing control. The adrenaline of the confrontation and the success of the sabotage had replaced the emotional guard I once held. I was armed, and I was ready for the final act. The stage was set for the final curtain, and I had the best seat in the house, a corner office at the competition. The Optima Holdings third quarter investor call began at 9 a.m. sharp. I was sitting in my new office at Apex, a temporary corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The coffee was better here. The air was cleaner. Marcus sat across from me, his feet up on the desk, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. We dialed into the conference bridge as anonymous guests. "Welcome to the third quarter earnings call." The moderator's automated voice intoned, "Please hold for the Chief Executive Officer, Richard Vance." Richard came on the line. He sounded like he had aged 10 years in 24 hours. His voice was raspy thin. "Good morning, everyone," Richard said. We have some updates regarding our strategic outlook. As you know, we are pivoting to a more agile client management structure." I could hear the tremble in his voice. He was reading a script Preston had probably written. He didn't believe a word of it. "We are streamlining operations," Richard continued, "moving away from legacy infrastructure to a digital-first approach." "Legacy infrastructure," Marcus mouthed at me, suppressing a laugh. However, Richard added, his voice cracking, "We have experienced some short-term volatility in our portfolio retention. We are addressing these issues." The line opened for questions. Usually these calls are tame softballs. Not today. "This is Michael from the pension fund." A voice boomed. I knew Michael, a nonsense guy. "Richard, I'm looking at the transaction reports. I see an $80 million outflow pending from the Sterling Group, and rumors of Vanguard exiting. Can you explain how streamlining operations resulted in losing your two biggest anchors in a single day?" Dead silence on the line. I could hear papers shuffling. I imagined Preston frantically scribbling notes, trying to feed his dad an answer. "Michael, that's a temporary reallocation," Richard stammered, going completely off script. "We are in discussions." "It doesn't look temporary." "Richard," Michael interrupted, "I spoke to Arthur Sterling this morning. He said he moved because, and I quote, 'the only person at Optima who knew how to read a balance sheet was fired yesterday morning.'" Marcus pumped a fist in the air silently. We had to make personnel changes," Richard said, his voice rising in full panic. George was difficult to manage. He wasn't aligned with the vision. "The vision," another investor cut in. "Richard, the vision seems to be bankruptcy. If he was the one holding the Sterling account, why the hell did you fire him before securing the asset? He must have." Richard was spiraling now, giving in to paranoia. "Who gave him the client list?" "Someone must have given him the list!" It was the wail of a dying king. "He didn't need the list," the investor shouted. "He was the list." The call descended into chaos, voices overlapping with questions about the stock price and demands for Preston's resignation. I reached out and pressed the end call button. Silence returned to the Apex office. "Well," Marcus said, exhaling. "That went well. Better than expected," I admitted. "The stock is down 12% in pre-market," Marcus said, checking his phone. "Richard is done. The board will have his head by noon, and Preston will be lucky if he can get a job at a car wash." I looked out the window. The river below was churning gray and cold, but moving steadily forward. The last vestiges of the internal conflict vanished. I didn't feel vindictive anymore, I just felt correct. The universe had corrected an error. Competence had won. "So," Marcus said, standing up, "lunch. I think Sterling is expecting us to celebrate the transfer." "In a minute," I said. "I have one last email to answer." I opened my personal inbox. There was a message from Optima's chief compliance officer, a woman named Sarah Miller. She was the one person at Optima who had tried to warn Richard about Preston's creative accounting years ago. The subject line read, "Resume." The body, "I assume you're hiring. I have the files on the regulatory breaches Preston ignored. Thought they might be useful for your due diligence. I can start Monday." I smiled. My reply, "See you Monday, Sarah." I grabbed my coat. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "Ready?" I said. I walked out of the office, my heels clicking on the polished floor. I didn't look back. I had my dignity. I had my clients. And I had the distinct, warm satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in a cooling office tower, Preston was finally learning the most important lesson of business. You can fire the employee, you can delete the email account, but you can never ever fire the truth. And the truth is, I was never difficult to manage. I was just too good to be led by a fool. The emotional arc was complete, replaced by the piece of empowered self-worth. I hit the elevator button going up,